Bruce Hines is back for another interview with us. Bruce was a senior auditor counselor in Scientology at the old Gilman Hot Springs International Base, and he was the trusted go-to auditor or counselor for celebrities such as Nicole Kidman, Kirstie Alley, Chick Corea, and many others, and also was the auditor or counselor for Mary Sue Hubbard, L. Ron Hubbard's wife. Well, in this video, we discuss also that he was the one who handled Dr. Gene Dank. Dr. Dank was L. Ron Hubbard's doctor up until the time that he passed away in 1986. And so we get into a discussion about Dr. Dank and also about Scientology and their treatment of people in Scientology who have cancer. And each one of us, Janice, myself, and Bruce, lost family members who were in Scientology who, if they had been treated for their cancer early, probably would have survived. But instead, because of the Scientology's beliefs, they ended up all passing away. We then discuss Bruce and his raising of his son in Scientology along with his wife at the time, and any regrets that he has regarding the treatment and the education of his son. I think you'll find this video interesting and informative. Stay tuned. Here comes Bruce Hines. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our channel, Scientology Peeling the Onion. My name is Mark Fisher, and I'm here with Janice Gilliam-Grady. How you doing, Janice?
G'day, Mark. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. We're having some kind of nice weather after Thanksgiving here. You know, not too bad.
I got a sweater on. Yeah, it's been cold, but it is beautiful outside right now. But it's had a little nip in the air this morning, so I'm staying warm. Yeah. Hey, today we have Bruce Hines back, and we got lots of good stories with him, and just going over a few things. This is going to go for a while because we keep coming up with, oh yeah, what about? So let's do a what about and get Bruce on now so we can talk about more. All right. Without further ado, here he is, Bruce Hines. Hey, Bruce.
Hi.
Hi, Bruce.
How's it going? Did you have a good Thanksgiving holiday?
Yeah, great. Had a really nice dinner with family, and it was very pleasant.
Yeah. Good. Now you're in Colorado. Are you near the mountains? Like, do you get a lot of snow where you're at, or anything like that in the winter?
Less than in the mountains. There was a big snowstorm in the mountains just before Thanksgiving. Denver's situated just on the east side of the mountains, like right up against the mountains.
Right.
And typically on the east side, because the way the prevailing winds go, we get less snow. So we did get maybe a couple of inches here in Denver, but didn't amount to anything. But now it
makes sense. The Rockies are in the way on the west, right? Everything comes west, it hits the mountains and dumps it, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah, I saw on the news some places they're shoveling snow, and I'm like, oh, I'm so glad to be in Vegas.
Yeah, Janice, that was Buffalo, New York. Buffalo, New York.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah.
I watched some of the football game last night. They had to.
Me too.
Oh yeah, playing football in the snow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course we had guests. Trey Lotz was from Buffalo, right, Janice? And we had Holly Carlson and other people that were from Buffalo, and I'm sure they're all glad they're not there anymore.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Anyway, your last video we did, we talked about, your training, how you got in Scientology, and also that, when you were up at the international base, how you were the go-to auditor in the senior CS Int office, taking care of various celebrities and different people like Mary Sue Hubbard and all that. And we wanted to continue with that conversation, and then we'll move on from there. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Listen, one of the people that you mentioned, and I just want to give a little preface, and Janice can actually give a little bit more, and somebody asked about this in the comments, was Dr. Gene Dank. And he was Hubbard's doctor, right, Janice, up until the time that he passed away up at the ranch in Creston. Can you tell people a little bit more about Dr. Dank, Janice, and then we'll ask Bruce about it?
Well, Dr. Dink worked at the Shaw Clinic, and that was actually owned by Amara Taz, who was original SEAL member back in '68. I knew her back on the ship. Anyway, she married. Anyway, she ended up owning it, and Dr. Gene Dink used to be there, and he treated SEAL members. They were all sent down there to see him because he had security clearance going up to. He went up to the base in Hemet. I don't remember him going to the base in La Quinta, but eventually.
Didn't he go to Sparks at one point, or no?
No, he didn't go to Sparks. What you're thinking about is towards the end of Hubbard's life. Dink had been up at Creston for a long time, and he wasn't supposed to know where he was, though that was a big joke. He knew where he was. Sarge used to pick him up and bring him up there, and he'd be hanging out doing nothing because he was there just to look after Hubbard. But meanwhile, he had his wife, Rachel, who he wasn't able to see or talk to or anything, and she was starting to put up a stink. So that's when my sister, as the executive director at ASI, Author Services,
right,
was instructed to take Dink on a short vacation. And so they went up to Reno. And that's where Dink got to see Rachel and spend some time with her. But there's also another part of that plan going on, because they then got the message it was time to come back. And they go back, and that's when Hubbard's, meanwhile, had been working on his will, and he had these major headaches going on, and he's asking, where's the will correction? And he doesn't even read it because he's got a major headache, and he just signs it and wants to just go lie down. And then that's the end of him. But Bruce, have you heard anything on this?
Well, just from Gene Dink himself.
Yeah.
And part of what happened was LRH had a stroke, and he was basically unconscious, I believe. And there wasn't anything Gene Dink could do at that point.
Right.
Gene Dink loved golf. He loved to play golf. He would golf whenever he got. So when he was up there, I'm not sure if he was on the Creston property or nearby or what. He went out to play around a golf one day, and that was an outrage for, I don't know if it was Pat and Andy Broker or DM or who, but he got in trouble for that. He said, how can you go play golf when L. Ron Hubbard is very ill? But, from his point of view as a doctor, is like, well, there's nothing else you can do at this point.
Right. Exactly. Right. Well, interestingly enough, you bring up Pat and Annie. My understanding at that time period was Annie was with Hubbard and Sarge was with him. Sarge was taking care of the animals, but Pat had been kicked out of Creston because he hadn't gotten the all clear. So Hubbard was really mad at him, and he wasn't to come back until he'd gotten the all clear. And that's of handling all the legal lawsuits, he and Miscavige. That was their job to get done. But Pat would come back at nighttime with communication exchanges, and also he had to get the will corrected. But otherwise, Hubbard didn't want to see Pat.
I didn't know that. It's the first time I've heard.
Oh yeah,
he was up at the Newberry. He was up at the Newberry property. They had another safe property where John Brousseau and Sinar Parman and people had been, but he was up at the Newberry. And Clarice Barnett. Let me ask you though, how did Gene Dank describe? Do you remember? I know you're not getting into any of his auditing sessions, but did he describe in terms of what happened, why he went up to Creston, and what did he find when he saw Hubbard?
No, he didn't really go into a lot of detail there. He still knew that there were things that he couldn't talk about, so he would kind of
talk around it.
He would sort of answer the auditing question or whatever, but he wouldn't go into those details.
Yeah. Was he a dedicated Scientologist, while you were auditing him, or was he on the outs, or what was going on with him?
He still was a dedicated Scientologist. He was still working at the Shaw Health Clinic. And it was he and Megan Shields were the two main MDs there.
Right.
There was also Stephen, whatever his name was, the chiropractor.
Stephen Price.
Stephen Price.
Yes.
He was there. And both Megan and Gene Dank were seeing Sea Org members, basically. You know, the ones in PAC just had to go up the street, go up Fountain.
Right.
There it was. I think there were some that came down from the base sometimes to see one.
Yeah, I did once. I did once.
I remember I had seen Dank one time, you know, for whatever reason. I don't remember, but I did.
But he was an interesting guy. He was very kind of soft-spoken, relaxed, like nothing seemed important to him. And all these people would get in an uproar about whatever. He talked about Megan having a cow one time. And he just, it would kind of just wash over him.
Yeah.
He wasn't that thrilled about being a doctor. When I was auditing him, he said, yeah, okay, I'll do it. But, you know, I'd rather go play golf. And,
him and Cooper Rounds, Janice.
Yeah, they could have played golf together.
I audited Cooper a bunch when
oh, really?
Yeah.
That was Janice's old flame back in her teenage years.
Yeah.
We tease her on the channel all the time. We got a viewer who always says, "Hey, did you see Cooper when you were on your cruise?" You know.
Yeah.
And then there was Becky Rounds or Becky Newman.
Becky
and
Newman.
The other brother,
Doug.
what was his?
Bob
Rounds.
Bobby.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the dad was Bill Rounds.
Yeah. And they had an oil company in Topeka, Kansas, or something like that, or.
Well, no, the mother was from Coleman.
Coleman
Camping
Stoves,
Gear.
Coleman Camping Gear, Coleman Stoves.
Oh,
Coleman
that's
Coolers.
right. That's what it was.
Yeah.
Coleman.
And the dad, Bill Rounds, he had a lumber company.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway.
Well, I knew they had money.
Yeah, they definitely did have money. Yes.
Well, let's go from Dr. Dank, since we're on medical, and let's talk about, you know, how, you know, Scientology doctors would treat or not treat cancer. I mean, we were just talking about that. You've got a personal story about that. I do too. But, you know,
I do.
Tell everybody about that. No, Bruce does. You do too, Janice?
Yes.
Okay. All right. You do too. So why don't we go ahead, Bruce, tell us the story about your sister and what happened with her.
Okay. So my sister, she's basically, there she is. That would have been, judging by my mustache, I was probably an auditor at Flag at that time. And she was probably at Flag visiting to get auditing. I can't quite figure out if that is the Sandcastle restaurant. It might be. Anyway.
I think it is. Yeah.
That's what looked familiar. I was trying to figure that out.
So she was 7 years older than me. And the short version is that she went all the way up the bridge. She did OT8. And she also donated to the IAS and became a patron. She got auditor trained. She did the briefing course, so she was class 6. And she also got CS trained. And she lived for a while in Boulder, Colorado after she moved from LA, and she CS'd at the Denver org. So as far as she couldn't join the Sea Org, she wanted to, but she'd taken LSD.
Right.
And interestingly, she and her husband, Joe Duncanson was his name, they were going to join the Sea Org at the same time as Rich and Linda Gilbert. And Rich had worked for my sister's husband, Joe. They were electricians. And anyway, they didn't, Rich and Linda Gilbert did join, and they were at the Int base. I think they were there when you were there. Well, they had been at CST. That's where they.
Okay. Because I don't remember them.
Okay. They must have gone to the base. Yeah, that's right. They were at CST because that is where they had an LSD pilot. And I don't know how this came about, but they were going to get some people who had taken LSD and have them join the Sea Org. Why at CST, I have no idea. And I guess see how they did or something. But it was actually 1995 when Rich got sent to the RPF, and Linda, who had been a a course supervisor, an auditor or something at CST. She went to gold. And then after the RPF, Rich went to gold. So that's why you wouldn't have known them.
Yeah, we wouldn't have known them. Just so everybody knows, CST is the Church of Spiritual Technology, and that's where Hubbard left all of his trademarks and copyrights and all that stuff. And they're the ones who are building the vaults, the hidden vaults, so out underground to preserve L. Ron Hubbard's technology for in perpetuity forever. Anyway, go ahead.
I got stories about that. I went there. I saw the vault. And, that's also purportedly where Shelley is. That
right?
Yes, that's right. That's where Shelley is.
But anyway, so my sister, in terms of being a public Scientologist, she was, pretty good. Public Scientologists are always urged to get auditor trained, but most of them don't.
Right.
But she did, and she actually audited, and she actually CS'd. In about 1991 or so, she noticed that she had a lump in her breast or something, but she wouldn't get it treated. She was just going to rely on auditing and maybe some alternative types of cancer treatment, changing your diet or something. Mm-hmm. And she just let it go. And by the end of must have been 97. She by that time she'd moved to Clearwater, and she passed away at the age of 52. But if you believe what they say about the OT levels, an OT8 and someone who's trained as an auditor and a case supervisor, they shouldn't get cancer. They shouldn't die from cancer, according to what they say. But she did. It was pretty sad. I was on the RPF at the time. I couldn't even go see her or go to her funeral or anything. But that's what happened with her. And because of what she believed, she didn't get traditional medical treatment. And from what I know now, it was very treatable. I know many women who had similar kinds of cancer, and it gets caught early and gets treated, and it's pretty much a done deal. So anyway, it was a pretty sad thing.
Now, when you were a CS and you worked in the senior CS office, international and all that, what was Scientology's viewpoint on treating somebody with cancer? I mean, obviously they should have gotten medical treatment. You know what I mean? Because you're basically treating the body. You're not treating the spirit or the thetan or whatever it is they're talking about, right?
Yeah, and it was interesting because this has always been one of those contradictions. In my opinion, there are many contradictions within what L. Ron Hubbard wrote. He did write that if someone's physically ill, you shouldn't audit them. You should send them to the doctor and get them treated.
Right.
And Megan Shields, for example, I talked to her about it. She actually recommended that someone with cancer get traditional medical treatment, chemo and surgery to remove a tumor and that sort of stuff.
Right.
But I just knew a lot of Scientologists who thought, well, no, look what it says in Dianetics, Modern Science and Mental Health, and look what it says in the Knott's materials. And, I shouldn't, and there's lots of false information out there about how, if you get a biopsy, that's going to spread the cancer. And, chemo is just something being sold by big pharma to make a lot of money. And so there were a lot of Scientologists, despite the fact that L. Ron Hubbard said you should go to the doctor, they didn't. And my sister was one of those.
There were a lot, too, from the Los Angeles area when they found they had cancer. They used to go down to Mexico. And in Mexico, there was, I don't know, I'd heard there was doctors who did surgery and there was doctors who did voodoo. And people would go down there and get healed through the hands, and suddenly the tumor is gone. And I've heard all sorts of different stories.
Yeah, well, Liz Ingber was one of those.
Right.
I was going to ask about her. Go ahead.
So she I guess that would have been after you left too. That was probably about 1992.
Well,
It was after, but we knew her. Janice grew up with her.
Liz got cancer while I was there because she was my junior at the time when she ended up in an emergency room, and they cut her open and found she had cancer, and when they took it out, it spread, and then she ended up being sent down to Mexico and was getting treatment down in Mexico. And then she was going through a healing process when I left. And then I'd heard later that it had come back again. And then I heard that she has had so many surgeries, she didn't want to go for any more. This was a few years ago. And she had a heart replacement or something in Ohio. And
Wow.
I believe she's still alive today.
That's amazing. Well, when she went to Mexico, to Tijuana, for some months, I would drive down every day to San Diego, and she was staying with a public Scientologist who was Mexican, but he had a house in San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
And I would go down and audit her. And I'd get there in the evening, give her a session or two, short nut sessions. And then during the day, she would cross the border and go see this guy whose name I'm forgetting right now. But he used this special concoction that would be given to her intravenously. And I believe it had, one of the ingredients was snake venom. It was kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
The thing is that the Mexican laws are different than the U.S. laws. So these people could not practice in the U.S.
Right.
So they would set up shop in Tijuana just across the border, and Americans could then cross over and get these sort of experimental or alternative treatments.
Right.
Weren't they getting like mega doses of liquid vitamins, or I don't know? They're, like you said, they were getting intravenous treatments of some kind, right?
Yeah, there was some like that.
Yeah, there were a bunch of different approaches. And,
Yeah.
And also part of it involved, Liz was on a very strict diet. She could only eat certain things.
That's right.
And what's her name? Morrison was there at the same time.
Sean Morrison.
Oh, Diane.
Diana, Sean's ex. Well,
Wife,
and she ended up passing away, but she was there also doing a similar treatment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's really crazy. Same thing with my sister, who was a public Scientologist. She died about 10 years ago from colon cancer at age 56. Never treated, but colon cancer is one of the most treatable cancers there is if you catch it early.
Yeah.
And not done. No, she's a Scientologist. She didn't do it. Then Janice, you had a story you were going to say?
Yeah, in 1977, on my mother's 50th birthday, she was down in Mexico, and she had a stroke while she was down there. That's what I heard. And I'd also heard she'd had one just before she went there. She was at Mickey McNeil's manager's for dinner, and she felt weird after she'd drunk something there, but she was flying off to Mexico the next day. And anyway, so in Mexico, she had a stroke, and they put her on a plane by herself and sent her back to LA. She was picked up at the airport, and I was told whoever it was that picked her up, it might have been Pakwotari, that she was slurring her words at the time, and she couldn't, she wasn't thinking and being able to talk. So anyway, she was then left on her own pretty much. Heba was down in Mexico with everyone else. And then my sister got a phone call saying, hey, your mom is really sick and no one's going to tell you about it. So my sister went up there, and there was my mom. The door was open. She walks in and she's delirious on the bed. So my sister immediately calls 911. How she knew to call 911, I don't know, because I would never have thought of that. I had no experience with it. But anyway, she called 911, got her to a hospital, and that's when they found she had a brain tumor. And so they then started auditing her. Ray Midoff was the auditor, and Paulette Cohen was the case supervisor, and they were auditing her on this. And I was actually going to go on leave, and Mom was going to take a week off and spend it with me. And I was told that my mom wasn't well, so I should delay going on the leave. And when she gets better, take my leave then. Otherwise, I'd just be sitting around with someone who was sick. But no one would tell me how serious it was until I got a letter from her where you could see that she was missing words in her letter. So everything wasn't computing over onto the paper. So I went to Paulette and, or actually I went to Annie, and Annie told me that she'd been really sick and that, but don't worry, she's getting audited by Ray and Paulette CS-ing it. And then when Paulette came back to the base, I said, hey, how's my mom? And she says she's fine. I'm like, oh, because I'd heard she was sick. And she was like, you weren't supposed to be told that.
Oh, God.
And I'm like, well, I got this letter. I'm trying to find out, how she is. Oh, don't worry. She's being audited by Ray. And then Hubbard came back from Sparks on the 5th of January, and he got a report that my mom had been sick. And meanwhile, she'd been sent from Los Angeles to Flag for David Mayo to oversee her auditing. And so David was now overseeing her auditing, and there was a medical officer there that was supposed to oversee her. And they had to borrow the money to send her because they didn't, Celebrity Center's not going to pay for her. She's public relations org now. I mean, they wouldn't even pay for her to fly to Flag. Anyway, she gets there, and my brother and I aren't being told anything, but my sister knew because she'd been in Los Angeles. She went out and saw my mom in Clearwater. Again, she was being neglected, and Terry ended up again getting her to a hospital. And she had 3 tumors by now. And Hubbard came back from Sparks, and he was informed, and he wrote a DFP interview to be done on her, a director of processing interview to ask her, what did she want to do? Did she want to continue with auditing and try and address these tumors, or did she want to just drop the body and pick up a new one? And apparently her answer was she wanted to drop the body and get a new one. And so then Hubbard wrote a new case supervision for her, which was basically the end of life rundown, where I guess you're told to go find a planet and run around it.
Wow.
And that's my story.
Yeah.
Yeah, your mom is clearly one of the most famous examples of mishandling cancer.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really crazy when you now years later, peeling the onion as we have, right? I mean, my mother's 94 years old now, right? She had a stroke this past summer. Like she had at 93, she had a stroke. She's in a group home where they take care of her. Well, she was slurring her words and there was a problem. So they called me, and she couldn't talk. And so I said, you call 911, get an ambulance there and get her to the hospital right away. And they said, oh no, we're doing that. We're just letting you know that that's what we're doing. By the time I got to the hospital, the emergency EMTs took her to the hospital. The doctor immediately walks up to me, goes, your son? I said, yeah. Do you make medical decisions for her? Yeah. He goes, well, listen, if we can treat her, we can give her this drug, but we've only got like another hour before it's not going to be effective, and it'll dissolve the blood clot or whatever's happening, and that's her best chance. And I said, well, does she have any other alternative? And he says, well, not really, no. I said, do it. You know what I mean? So they gave it to her, and literally within about an hour and a half, 2 hours, she started coming out of it. And by the next day, she was back to normal and out of the hospital 2 days later. Wow. So it's just crazy, Scientology's viewpoint about how you treat a body, which they don't even believe that you are your body. Your body is a vehicle. You know what I mean? It's basically like your car. And yet they won't let medical doctors remove the tumor or do the radiation or chemotherapy or whatever the standard treatment are to try and heal the body. It's really crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll never forget, Janice, Bruce, you might relate to this too. When we were in the Sea Org, if we had a fever, if we got cold, or we had a fever and we were hot, or you had to go to the isolation, right? And you basically had, they would feed you water and you get sessions and all that, but they wouldn't give you anything for your fever, right? I'll never forget when we left the Sea Org, the first time I had a fever and got a cold, somebody said, "Oh, you should take two Tylenol. Your fever will go away." And I said, "I don't know. Still kind of like, this is the medication, it's drugs. You know what I mean?" I went, "Screw it." I took the 2 Tylenol. Boom! Within an hour, my fever was gone, and I was like, "It's a miracle."
Well, I will.
And I didn't become addicted to Tylenol. You know what I mean? So it was kind of like it was an epiphany for me, going like, that was a bunch of shit they were telling me.
Well, I will say, in Hubbard's defense, on the ship, he used to get daily medical reports, and anyone with a fever, he would have the medical officer do a graph, and they had to graph the person's temperature, and they had to take it like every 4 hours. And he actually would go to the physician's desk reference and look up what antibiotics they should be having for what symptoms. And Hubbard would then oversee the medical officer waking up that person every 4 or 6 hours to give them their antibiotics and graphing it and so forth. And then your temperature had to stay normal for 24 hours, and then you could come out of isolation. But Hubbard actually was doing that himself, directing the medical officer on it.
Yeah, they continued that at the base, the isolation until your fever is supposed to go subnormal and then back to normal and be that way for 24 hours.
Right, but I don't think they were doing the antibiotics part of it. They were just vitamin C.
Yeah.
Or Tylenol or an aspirin, a couple aspirin. You know what I mean? I mean, I learned that as a kid, but I got completely disabused of that idea when I got in Scientology.
Well, growing up in Scientology, I had never taken an aspirin in my life. So the thought of taking an aspirin to break a fever, I took antibiotics under Hubbard's direction or heavy doses of vitamin C later on, but I'd never had an aspirin.
Yeah, well, there was the one bulletin, drugs, aspirin, and tranquilizers, where he talked about how bad aspirin is.
Right.
But I have all these memories of lying in a bed in the maintenance man's house waiting for my fever.
I do remember him, though, Claire Popham, who was a fellow messenger. I remember her having a headache, and he actually told her to take an aspirin.
Wow.
When Dee Dee was having menstrual cramps, he had her sipping on some gin.
Huh.
So
interesting.
Hey, Bruce, Janice mentioned the end of life. Did you ever have to do any of that kind of auditing for Sea Org members or anybody who was getting ready to die? Since you were in the senior assistant office.
Yeah. But I've seen this CS that I think that LRH wrote for your mom, Janice, and about end cycles and I guess deliver communications you want to or something, and then the part where after you drop the body to go circle around something. So that was taken from an advice, and I can't remember when the advice was written. It must have been. I didn't know it was before your mom got ill, but anyway. I did do that, and I had to, get a star rate and method for word clearing on this advice. And in that, Hubbard said that the best thing you could do when you die was to go out and find a piece of space rock, as he called it, in space, and go round and round and round it. And this was the advice that was the basis of the running program.
The running program, right. I was going to say, became the running program on Earth.
Yeah. And he talked about how, trillions of years ago in the past or something, there was some civilization that did this, and they had a pole out in space, and they would somehow, they were selling a service, and, Thetans would come from all over and circle around in a pole out in space. It was big, and you could actually see the glow of the Thetans going around the pole. That's what he said. But
that's
anyway,
right. I remember hearing that. Yeah.
There were a couple times where I did tell someone that they should go do that. One was Ken Hoden's wife, who was staff of the Office of Special Affairs, United States, which was located in the Blue Complex in LA. And she had a brain aneurysm one day. She just came in to post and had a brain aneurysm. And it was a bad one. A blood vessel burst and destroyed a lot of brain tissue and was effectively brain dead. And so I had to tell her to go do that. That was a whole story also. I was like the minister, quote unquote, that went into the hospital, like her minister.
Oh, yeah.
And was actually present when they disconnected her from the machines that were keeping her alive. That was pretty strange.
It's funny you mentioned the running program, because Janice was like PC number 1 or whatever on the running program, right?
Number 1.
I was on it too, because when I went to the RPF in 1982, it was required that anybody who went from INT, you had to do the running program to graduate the RPF. And so I did it for 51 days in LA. And it just reminds me of how many times I was a guinea pig on new rundowns being developed by L. Ron Hubbard, from the purification rundown. When that first started, I was one of the first people in the sauna, to, the running program, to Key to Life, to happiness rundown, all these different things. And, and in the senior CSINT office, you would see that stuff too, wouldn't you? Because you guys would be overseeing those pilots, wouldn't you?
Yeah, there was actually a pilot's officer that would run these pilots. And they would be these sort of Xeroxed copies of someone had typed out, on just white paper, and those would be the issues. And if it all worked out, those would become HCOBs. They'd become actual technical bulletins later.
Yeah. Did you ever do the running program?
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. I did 2 versions of the Purif, though. The first one was where you would run in a rubberized sweatsuit.
Yeah,
that was in Los Angeles. So I did that one. And then when I got to Flag later, I did the one in the sauna also.
Yeah, I did the one. They built the sauna in the breezeway at the Fort Harrison. Do you remember that? By the laundry room, there was a sauna that they built there.
Yeah,
and that was for the crew, and myself and Phyllis Knutson and several other people. We were all put on it. I had no drug history, so it was kind of ridiculous. But anyway, so I did that one there. But I had to do the running program, and it's wild. I've told this story. We did a video on the running program. I mean, I had tremendous wins on it after like 30 days, you know what I mean? But the thing is that, like, we were doing it 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, rain or shine, and it was grueling and also really wild, right? But then afterwards I was going like, well, how come I feel so good? And after I left Scientology, I found out we kind of was probably experiencing a runner's high, which I had never heard of before, that marathon runners get the same thing when they run long distances.
Yeah, I had that a bit with the well, first of all, I did this sauna, the Purif in the sauna, the same sauna you just described in the FH, at Fort Harrison Hotel.
Yeah,
all these abbreviations, it's horrible. But I experienced that with the rubberized sweatsuit, and when I was running, and I would run in LA, and I think a lot. It's also, you're just getting in good shape, and you're getting better sleep. And you're taking vitamins, and you're getting better food. And so I got in really good shape. I could run like an hour straight. Nothing like what you had to do on the running program, but
right.
Just that. You feel better. You're building up the body, and I do think there's something about the runner's high, the endorphins and everything, and the adrenaline that gets going in the body, and then just makes you feel good.
Yeah.
Well, in 1980, CMO INT, we were down in PAC for several months. And so everyone was doing the purification rundown. So they just built the sauna there down in the basement. And we would all just sit there with nothing to do. So we said, hey, let's get some movies going.
Yeah, I heard about that.
So
watch
every
movies.
night we'd watch new movies every night. I remember even watching Deer Hunter while in the sauna.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Pretty wild. Yeah. Anyway, I wanted to ask you another story about, when at the international base at Gilman Hot Springs. I mean, we famously left after the flood that happened in the summer of 1990. Were you there during that flood period? And do you remember any of that time period at all?
Oh, it's indelibly etched into my brain. It was such a traumatic thing. It was interesting. I was in senior CSINT office and the heavy rain started.
Yeah.
And we were told, don't go out, just stay and do your post, work on it. This was the senior CSINT people. But I know, for example, Biddy was out tromping through mud and stuff after the mudslide happened.
Yeah.
And, but then the thing that I remember the most was the David Miscavige briefing in MCI and that was one of the more traumatic things, shouting multiple times, "Fuck you" to all the gold staff, and why the gold staff why they would be responsible for that rain, just stupid. But
yeah, and Wendell not going outside in the rain.
Oh yeah.
Didn't want to get his white uniform dirty.
Yeah.
Who's going to go out in the rain? Stay inside.
And Bruce, I was standing next to Janice's husband, Paul. We were both in gold because we were both working on the sports fields, right? So we had to stand at the front with everybody else. And Paul and I both are thinking to ourselves, he has completely lost his mind. I'm out of here. And then Janice, you and Paul and I, we all took off that night. We left. That was my second blow was that night. And you guys left and didn't come back.
I turned to Paul and I said, "I'll take the car." And he said, "I'll take the bike." So we both knew we're getting everything off the base away from there.
Wow.
Yeah. It is a monumental event in the Sea Organization. Anybody who was there, it's embedded in their time track or whatever.
Yeah.
And you know what? I had to give up my Sea Org Day bonus because Sea Org Day was the next day, and I was gonna get 22 years worth of bonus. I thought that's good money. It was probably only $200-300, but
it was a lot more than you normally would get.
Exactly.
Well, Janice, you don't have to worry about it because it was canceled. Okay, Sea Org Day was canceled after that flood, and nothing. And then James Byrne and Greg Wilhair showed up, and the rest was nightmare.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we left the day James Byrne and Greg were fired in there. It was like, not staying here for this.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, Bruce, now you had a son who you had in the Sea Org or in Scientology too, right?
Mm-hmm. I did.
Yeah. Why don't you tell everybody that story about that, and we'll go into that.
Okay. So he was born when I was still in Florida. I was in the Flag Service Organization as an auditor. And
who was your wife?
Who was it? Her name
who was it?
Mary Chris. Now
Chris Hines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she had, she ended up lines, but for a while she was in LA and she was in the ITO for a while. She was also tech trained. And then she was
International Training Organization.
Yeah, right. International Training Organization. It used to be in Clearwater, but then they moved it to LA. And Bill Franks was the head of it when I first got to Flag.
That's right. Yeah.
But anyway, so he was born in 1984 while we were in Flag. And so that's him there after he Mary Chris and his name is Tim, had been transferred from Flag to, I think, to the International Training Organization in LA. And so this was
and where were you at this time?
So I was at the base at this time.
And you were married?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and my wife was in LA, so that was bad also. I was up lines, and at that time you could go down during, God, it's so complicated, during the renos period on Saturday.
Right.
They would do the renovations of the base up lines. If you were a parent and you were at the end base and you had your kid was in LA at that time. And so they would let you go down during the renos time and you could see them. And I think this was on one of those days. So you would take the van down, the parents would take the van down. Some people had cars, but you could take the van down Friday night. And so you would stay with wherever your wife's birthing was and where the kid was. And then you'd have part of the day. And then you had to take the van up in the afternoon on Saturday and be backup line Saturday night. That's when they had you clean the org and stuff.
Right.
But anyway, so that picture was one of those times. It was in LA. I think that was near the Hollywood sign. You could see the hills in the background. So he was probably 3 or 4 at that time. And so he would have been in the ATA. No, I can't remember what these things were called. They had a place for Sea Org kids near CC Int at the time. And there was also,
the cadet org, they had one at the annex of the manor. The old AOLA was
oh yeah, that's right. That's
right.
And so I know he was there part of the time. And it seems like there was also some childcare thing also in the package.
Yeah, there was. It was another name, but I can't remember what it was either.
I can't remember it either. Anyway, eventually they decided to, if you were stationed at Gilman Hot Springs and you had kids, the kids were all moved out to Happy Valley, which is his other property. And they set up a school, supposedly, that was called the Castile Canyon School, because that road that went through the Saboba Indian Reservation up to the Happy Valley, that road is called Castile Canyon. It's located in it. And so he was out there. And at the time, I believed that, wow, this is like ideal way for him to be raised. He's going to have he's not going to have false data from quote unquote WOG education, education outside of Scientology. And he won't have the influence of the psychs, and he'll learn study tech, and he'll get educated, won't accumulate a bunch of misunderstood words, and he's going to learn Scientology policy and Sea Org policy. And, these were like supposedly going to be the future Sea Org executives that were out there at this so-called school. So it was more like a boarding school, really. They lived and went to school there. However, I came to learn that they didn't really go to school, or very little. They had a course room set up, and just they would have check sheets to do, and there would be sort of a supervisor who wasn't really well trained. And anyway, they just didn't really learn hardly anything. Years later, I met up with my son and I. We both left the Sea Org. And
did you leave together, or you left separately?
Left separately. That was quite a bit later. But he, at that time, he must have been 18. Let's see. He must have been 18. And he was semi-literate. He couldn't really write a complete sentence. And he could read somewhat, but not great. He couldn't do simple arithmetic, knew nothing about history or civics or forms of government, or he just was not educated at all.
Right.
And when he was out at this school in Happy Valley, it was just a lot of manual labor, messed work. They did that. They would have projects just like they love to have projects that you would have to complete.
Right.
And there was a hierarchy, and there was, they were taught all the Sea Org etiquette. They had to say sir, and they were supposed to anyway, and had to keep statistics. And anyway, it was just a pretty, they would do marching and practice saluting and hauling rocks. And, anyway, it was just like really not great. And anyway, back to my son, he left the Sea Org just a month before I did. And that was one of the reasons why I thought I could leave, was because I didn't feel I needed to stay for him. And
what was he doing? What did he actually start working in the organization, or what happened?
Mm-hmm. They in 2001, because there'd been a lot of bad publicity about the RPF out at Happy Valley, and for maybe whatever reasons, DM David Miscavige thought they disbanded the RPF out at Happy Valley. Now, they'd done that earlier in about 1990, 91 or something.
Yeah, they did that in 1990.
Yeah, and that was one of the ways they made room to have the kids out there.
Yeah.
Anyway, they disbanded it, and they ended up selling that property. And part of it was that all the kids that were there were given the option of joining the Sea Org. And I don't know what the other option would have been. They would have had to go live with some other family member. They couldn't live with their parents, who were Sea Org members at the base at the time. And so they all opted to join the Sea Org. So my son would have been, 10, 11? No, a little older. He would have been about 15.
Okay.
And so he signed a Sea Org contract, and he ended up going to the American St. Hill organization, the foundation at ASHO-F. And he was
in Los Angeles. Yeah.
And he was the course administrator.
And
originally.
where was his mother?
Oddly, she decided to route out.
So he was left in the Sea Org with you.
Yeah, but I was in New York.
Oh, so you weren't even there. I was going to say, did you get to see him at all at Happy Valley once they moved up there at all? Like
we would get to see him Sunday morning. That was the Clean the Ship CSP program.
Right.
So we could, luckily, my wife and I had a car, so we could go to Happy Valley, pick him up Saturday night, take him to our berthing, which was in Hemet when the berthing was there.
Right.
And the berthing, that's where you live if you're in the Sea Org.
Right.
Yeah.
It was an apartment. It was an apartment. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we'd have to take him back Sunday morning, and we'd have to be back in time for muster right after lunch Sunday. And so that was when we got to see him. If there was a flap or something, an emergency, we might not get to do that. But that was the extent of when we could see him. And so in this 2001 time period, I got sent to New York. I had been on the RPF, and I got sent to New York when the RPF was disbanded. And he was in LA, and his mother routed out. So he was there by himself.
So now he was in LA at the kids' ranch there?
No, he was actually at Sea Org.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And he wasn't happy, and he tried to blow a couple times. And they
blame him.
Yeah. And he, I think he was like being handled. He was being sec checked, I think, having to do mess work, some, physical labor. And they offered him to go to New York so he could be with me. And if he did that, would he stay? Because he was saying like he wanted to leave the Sea Org. And he's just, he's like 17 years old at this point.
And he has no outside experience.
Zero. And no family outside. He didn't know anybody outside.
Right.
And so he said, yeah, okay, I'll go to New York. And so that was actually a pretty happy thing for me at the time. I remember taking a subway out to LaGuardia Airport, and his flight came in. I picked him up, and we rode the subway back to Midtown Manhattan, which is where the Continental Liaison Office was here in New York City. And he was able to work in the unit I was in a little bit, but then they started sending him on projects. They're always looking for someone, they always have something they needed to do.
Right.
And he went out to do some registration type stuff in Washington, D.C., which was under that Continental Liaison Office, Eastern United States.
Right.
And Boston. Just before he left, though, he got sent on another project to Buffalo. And we were talking about Buffalo before this started. And he was on a project to update their central files. And the reason why was Buffalo was going to be the first so-called ideal org. It was the first in this ideal org program that's been going for many years now. That was going to be the first one. It had to be because they lost their building. There was no building for the organization. So David Miscavige picked Buffalo, I guess, to have a new org for them. Right. And always what they have to do when they build one of these new orgs is update the central files that are never current. They're just always a mess. So he was there, playing with folders and alphabetizing them and stuff. And he just snuck away one night and got on a bus. And anyway, so he was gone. I didn't know no one knew where he went. Mm-hmm. And somehow he decided that he was going to go to Denver. And that was because he knew that's where I was from and that I had some family there. But he'd never met them.
Okay.
Well, actually, he met my dad when he was.
And he didn't know where his mother was.
No, well, maybe he knew where she was, but I think he knew that he couldn't go there because she was still a Scientologist, and he was blown.
He was blown.
Okay.
She was up near this little place outside of Sacramento called Auburn, Northern California.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And anyway, it was just by luck. My brother, who he'd lived in Denver his whole life, and he was a medical doctor, and he called. Somehow he had my brother's phone number. I don't know how. And Tim was at a bus station. So he just ridden a bus all the way from Buffalo to Denver, like a Greyhound mm-hmm. bus.
Yeah.
And he was at the bus station, and someone had approached him in the bus station trying to recruit him to go out in a van to all kinds of cities around the Western United States to sell magazines. They were just trying to get personnel to go on these wild things. And he didn't have anything else to do. And he said, well, gosh, I'll get a little pay and I'll get some food. He was starving by then.
Yeah.
But he called my brother, and my brother dropped everything and went to the bus station. And he thought that he was calling my dad. Mm-hmm. My dad was a doctor also. My brother's a doctor. He was calling. And then when my brother showed up at the bus station, my brother and I look a lot alike, even though he's 4 years older than me. And uh-huh. He said he thought it was me, and he got scared because he thought I was still in the Sea Org and that I was there to try to bring him back.
Wow.
Anyway, my brother took him in and let him stay at the house there. And I, on a hunch, called my brother, and I said, have you seen Tim? And he said, oh yeah, he's staying with us. And so that's how I knew Tim, where he was, and that he was in good hands.
Uh-huh.
And so about a few weeks after that, when him no longer there, that was one of the reasons why I felt it was okay for me to leave. And so I left from New York City shortly after that.
And went to Denver to join up with him?
Yeah, although I didn't know what I was going to do right away. I just got snuck away.
Yeah.
That's a whole story in itself. I won't go into that right now.
We'll get that next interview.
Yeah.
Well, how did you reconnected with your son after you left over?
Yeah, I did. So, but not right away. I wasn't sure where I was going to go. So I ended up saying I might as well go to Denver. This is where I grew up. I had some friends here.
Right.
But I wasn't going to let my brother or Tim know that I was there, because I knew that the Sea Org people looking for me would contact my brother.
Right.
And I didn't want him to be.
And he was not a Scientologist. He was not a Scientologist.
He never was. And so, but anyway, after that, I ended up getting a job, and Tim came and stayed with me, and we got him. We worked on getting him able to pass a GED. So that's the equivalent of a high school diploma in the U.S.
Right.
And you have to take some tests and stuff. And so we'd help him study for it. So he got the GED. And then the next step we decided to do was to have him try to get into a community college. So there's one in Denver, Community College of Denver, it's called. And so they accepted him. And I really learned to respect community colleges, because what they do is that they test a person when they come in, and then they put them in courses that will actually bring up their abilities, like their abilities to read and write, the abilities to do simple mathematics. And so that's what they did. And then I went on for like a couple of years, I guess. He's taken these classes, and he was then able to apply or sort of transfer from that community college to the University of Colorado. And he got accepted to that.
Wow.
And he persevered, and it wasn't easy for him, but he eventually got a degree. He got a college degree.
Wow. And what does he do now?
And now he works in a Safeway in the Denver area.
That's good. And you still have a good relationship with him?
Yeah.
Did you
never really? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say he never really got over his horrible upbringing.
I'm sure.
No, and I don't blame him. Yeah.
I was going to say, did you maintain a good relationship even though when you were in the Sea Org and he was at Happy Valley and all that, or was it always not a good relationship because of the separation and all that sort of stuff?
No, when we would see each other, it was good. We definitely had affection for each other, but for about let's see, it would have been 5 years, almost 6 years, I was out at Happy Valley on the rehabilitation project force, and he was out there. Well, actually,
unbelievable. It's still unbelievable that people were on the RPF for 6 years, let alone I was on for 4 months, and I thought that was long. And I graduated. You know what I mean? 6 years.
It was supposed to be a 4-week program.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, I remember.
And you're tech trained. You're technically trained.
Well, that was one of the reasons I was on it for so long. Although a lot of people were on it for a long time.
Yeah, no, Chuck Beatty. I mean, the first time I heard his story, and I almost fell out of my chair. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I mean, I did the running program and graduated in 4 months. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Chuck and I were there together. We spent a lot of time together.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons, though, for me was because I was tech trained, and the golden age of tech, as it became known, there was a pilot project before it was actually issued to the public. And out of the rehabilitation project force, we got these issues. And there were also some revised tech films. And as a tech trained person then, I had disagreements. I thought that, no, this isn't right. This isn't what L. Ron Hubbard said.
So you got to stay on longer.
Yeah, because I had disagreements with David Miscavige.
When Chuck told me, and Amy Scobie told me as well, that RPFers had to get a video pass before they could, audit their twin. I'm thinking, what happened to read it, drill it, do it? Yeah. I mean, that was what the program was for the RPF. You read the tech, you drilled it, and you just did it. There was no like, oh, you got to get a pass on this and that. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
The whole program was ridiculous. The whole program was ridiculous, but then it was made super ridiculous after we left. It's unbelievable. Anyway.
Yeah, it was crazy.
So how's your relationship with your son now, and how do you looking back on it? I take it that's one of the regrets you have is the parenting and the raising of kids in the Sea Org, right?
Yeah, a big one. That's one of my biggest regrets. There was no choice in the matter. Mm-hmm. There was, I think, 1988, and Edie Int came out with an issue where it was canceling family time, and that's what it was called, when you could go, if you had kids, you get a little extra time to go spend time with the family. So that was canceled, and it was also forbidden then for Sea Org members to have children. And that's when there were, a lot of forced abortions started.
Yeah, and that was just put out in his name. That was David Miscavige.
Oh yeah, he was Guillaume put out this issue. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you bring that up, and the whole kid thing. And back in January 78, when my mother was dying, she'd been separated from my brother, sister, and I, from when I was 11, because she was sent off to Los Angeles, and she petitioned to have us sent to her, and it was denied. And in that 5-year period, I probably only saw her 3 times. But when she was dying, and Liz Gablehouse was working with her for Mom to do her hat turnover on handling celebrities and what she did with Celebrity Center, my mother told Lizzie, who was pregnant at the time and had a 1-year-old or a baby around that age, my mother told her, take your children and go. Don't let what happened to me happen to you with your kids.
Wow, no kidding.
Yeah. So when Lizzie told me that, I was like, that touched me, because I'd never thought it had affected my mother, but it had affected her. She just held it in very well.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Yeah.
And it was a different mindset for the people who are watching this who were never in. When you're a dedicated Scientologist and Sea Org member, that's all you think about. You know what I mean? You're so intensely indoctrinated that the greatest good is for my kids to be out at this ranch and let them take care of them. I have work to do in whatever job you have, and it's more important than your family or even your own personal life. And it's hard for people to understand that, but you get that mindset. I mean, that's why we call our channel Peeling the Onion, because even after leaving, we were still dedicated Scientologists for a long time, and it took time for us to unpeel that onion, and get to the truth of the matter,
Yeah,
right.
I had to unpeel the onion also. Once I got back here.
Yeah. All right. Well, this is a good place to end off here. Okay, we've got a lot more we want to talk to you about. Is that all right, Bruce?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I have a lot more to say.
Great.
Good.
No, I hope all the viewers have enjoyed this and stuff. And now it's time to do some commerce. Janice, your daughter and her CBD salve, right? It's a salve.
Yes, it's a salve.
It's on special. It's for Christmas coming up. Why don't you tell people about it, and then I'll.
Yeah, well, she doesn't have non-scented left. She only has scented, which is essential oils and such. But it's a salve which helps with pain, and it's got emu oil in it, which helps it get into the body. And the emu oil is the closest thing you can find to human oil, so it's very good. Anyway, she makes this with love, and she's doing a special right now, trying to sell out her current stock, because she has to do a name change and a company change. So she's just trying to unload everything right now, and she's doing a special on it. And there are a lot of success stories from people using this, and including from myself. I have an issue with my knee, and at nighttime, if it hurts, I put that on and I can go to sleep.
Yeah. So the Oracle CBD salve, it's a 15% discount. The promo code is holiday15, all one word, holiday15. And it's good until the end of the year, December 31st. And if you want to order it, you go to her website, which is www.healedbyoracle.com. And you can order it there. And then when you check out, the promo code is holiday15, all in one word, and you get that 15% discount. And it lasts, you order it and it lasts a long time. So, you know, it's definitely a good product.
Yeah, you just use a teeny little bit. So it lasts months or a year.
Yeah. And then the other thing, since it's Christmas time, all of our merchandise on our site is 10% discount on all merchandise. The promo code is Christmas at checkout. So if you want to order any of our connection merchandise, like the hoodies or the sweatshirts or this canvas tote bag or anything like that, it's got the connection symbol on it with a heart with 2 arrows pointed to it. Doesn't say anything about Scientology, so you can buy it and send it to your friends in Scientology or your family members or whatever. But anyway, we've got a 10% discount on all of our merchandise until Christmas, and that's the promo code at checkout is the word Christmas.
Right, and to add on to that, don't forget about your friends and loved ones who are still in Scientology. I'm sure they'll love to hear from you, whether they know it or not. They'd love to hear from you. So send them a Christmas card. Yeah. Throw in a check if you want to, because I'd probably really appreciate a little extra cash. And if they cash it, that, feel good about having sent that money to help them and make it.
They may not cash it, Janice. They may not cash it, so you might want to put a $20 bill in there or something,
No, because you don't want security to take it. But if you send them a check, if they cash it, they got it. Otherwise, that they did what Ellen Reynolds did, which is she didn't cash it and didn't want the money from an ex-Sea Org member who was trying to help her.
Right. Anyway, also, please subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Hit that like button, hit the notification button. It helps us get the word out, and it keeps you informed when we have our next video. If you have any questions or comments about anything that we've asked, that we've talked about, just go down below, put them in there. We read them. And there's questions. If you have questions for Bruce or comments, please ask below, and then we'll bring it up the next time we do a show with him. And if you'd like to support our channel, buy us a coffee. There's a link in the description down below. You can buy us a coffee, and it's just a way to support the channel. Anyway, that's the show. Have you guys got anything else you'd like to say, Bruce, before we end?
No, I'm good.
Okay, good.
Okay, well, looking forward to the next one.
Yeah, me too.
Until next time, we'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.